Yo, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be showing you how to build a Pandora V2. I'm going to take you through all the stages of building the Pandora 2. So you need to take your Inspire 2 apart and have all the parts ready to go, and then follow along in this video to assemble your Pandora V2. After the build, I show you how to fit the GPS module. Now, it's a good idea to watch the whole video first before you build your Pandora V2, especially this part at the end regarding the GPS module, because if you plan on using that, it's probably easier to fit that while you're doing the build rather than afterwards. But I wanted to show how you could still fit it and remove it once the Pandora V2 is fully assembled. The other important part in this video is going to be regarding the software parameter changes that you need to make to the Inspire 2 in order to make the gimbal work. So the brain inside here is turned on its side, so the gimbal won't work unless you do the parameter changes. It's also quite a good idea to do the parameter changes first, maybe even before you've taken the Inspire 2 apart. That way you, during the build, and more so during the initial testing after you've taken your Inspire 2 apart and you need to check that it's all working, you can do the parameter changes on the brain so that the gimbal works with the brain lying flat on its side. Otherwise it's really awkward to try and hold the brain in the upright position and have the gimbal upright. So yeah, watch the full build guide, and especially the two parts at the end regarding the GPS and the parameter changes. Take your time, work your way through the video, and good luck. The first thing we're going to do is prepare the wiring for powering the Pandora and for powering the fan, which runs on independent power from this little 12-volt back. So I can show you the wiring diagram now, so it's nice and clear where everything has got to go. And yeah, you can pause and look at that as much as you want, but it might be easier for you to just have a look at what I've made here. So XT60 input, got ground on the bottom there, and we're using one of the DJI power input pins. And we're also connecting a ground cable that goes to the 12-volt back. The 12-volt back you're going to fit with this little 2-pin JST connector that feeds up to the fan, which we'll get into later. And the power is going to go from this switch so that we can independently turn the fan on and off without powering up the Pandora. It's very rare, but in some circumstances it can get really hot and shut down, so you can turn off the power to the Pandora but leave the fan running, so it will cool it down really quickly. Then the positive coming in from the XT60 is going over to this switch, and we're also taking the power from there to feed the 12-volt back through this other switch. And the center pin of the main switch, where the voltage comes out when you turn it on and off, that's going straight into a DJI power pin that will go into the PDB. Now you might be wondering why I haven't soldered these to the fan switch yet, and that's because bring the bottom print in here, you can solder this all together like this off without fitting anything to the base print, and all of these parts can fit through the switch hole and then be fitted, so it just makes it a lot easier to do a nice tidy job. So the wiring diagram's got all the lengths of cable that you want to cut them to and what to use. So okay, bloods from the future here. Before fitting this wiring loom or wiring harness to the bottom print, it's a good time to actually test all your dismantled Inspire 2. So you can use this wiring harness to connect to the PDB and give the PDB power, and power up your dismantled Inspire 2 parts, just to make sure everything's working as it should do before fitting everything to the Pandora kit. So as you can see, I've been able to feed everything through main power switch hole just before fitting this switch. So this is just pushed in there, and it's got these little plastic tabs. So they're quite hard to get out, so it's easier to do it this way. So the XT60 power going from that can just hook onto there. The XT60's going to go through the XT60 hole on the other side there. This back fits in the little slot there, like that. And then this cable and this cable are what we use to connect to the fan switch. So fit the fan switch in there. So for fitting the XT60, obviously that's just loose, and although it doesn't come out the other end, as soon as you try to push it in, it's obviously going to come out. So there's all sorts of different glue on the market, but honestly I just find using hot glue to work the best. So I use hot glue to hold in the XT60. I use a bit of hot glue on the back of the back to hold that in place there so it doesn't move around. I also use a couple of little blobs of hot glue to secure these little cables nicely out of the way. Like I just tuck them on there, put a little bit of hot glue in there to hold it in place. Do the same for this cable as well, and for this cable as well. Make sure you don't, when you're routing this power cable, you want to make sure it's at the front so it doesn't block any of the space there. You might hopefully be able to see inside here, there's a little cutout there, and that's where the SSD cable is going to slot in. So just make sure you don't block that, and obviously the SSD is going to be coming across here, so don't block that neither. So yeah, I'm just going to get that done now and show you when it's done. Okay, so as you can see here, I have now fitted the wiring harness and I've glued in my XT60 so it's nice and secure. I've routed my wires and secured them with a little blob of hot glue, and yeah, it's all looking nice and neat and tidy and all ready to go. It's actually a good time now to test the fan and make sure that the switch and the beck and everything is working. So if you take the other end of the JST and cut your fan wires like so, and then solder that onto there, you can fit it to the other end. Just make sure I'm doing that the right way, which I'm not. And you can take an XT60, and as you can see, the back powers up and the fan turns on off of that one switch. And you can also, it's maybe not a bad idea to double check that your switch and everything is working, so just use a multimeter to just double check that when you activate this switch you're getting battery voltage off of these two pins. So now that we've tested the fans working and that the voltage is all good, we can go ahead and fit the SSD drive connection. So fit the included extension lead to the back of it like so. Okay, so this part is going to fit inside here like that. This cable needs to go like so, and it's going to come out here. There's a little gap just inside there. I'm not sure the camera's going to pick it up. But yeah, so this lead is going to come out here, it's ready to plug in there, and we're going to just feed this other cable around the bottom there and going into that little slot that I showed you earlier, and then feeding it up here. So it's going to be easier if we fit these two M2 screws, so it holds this in place. So now with those two screws secured in place, it just stops that moving around, and it's nice and easy to just loop this cable around a bit underneath there, making sure you don't block the path between the SSD slot and the SSD connector. And using that little slot there, you can it helps just pinch that in place. Saves having to use hot glue on this particular cable. And for now, we're just gonna tuck that up there. And that's ready to plug into the brain that goes on the top. This is now ready to go across and plug into the PDB. That's ready to go up to the fan. And obviously these two pins are ready to plug into the PDB. So, bring the PDB in now. I find it easier to do this with these two cables that are going to go up to the brain already fitted. And it's going to go in like so. So you feed these two cables through. Like that. You can just have those poking out the bottom. We've got the pins there ready to plug in. But before plugging those in, we're just going to secure that in place. So you're going to use these three countersunk screws. They're going to go here, here, and here. Like that. And then they're just secured in place using lock nuts. Okay, so I got the PDB now fitted to the bottom print, and it's ready to plug in the SSD extension cable. Now you'll see on this that the colours might vary, but there'll always be two of one colour at one end. So in this case I've got two black at that end, and then the rest will be a different colour, but they'll all be the same. So whichever one has the different colour on the end, so in this case the black, that goes inwards in towards the centre of the PDB rather than the outside of the PDB. Maybe the best way to explain it. Now you'll see that this is actually sticking up proud of the print. Only a little bit, but don't need to worry about that too much, because when the brain goes on top, there's like a recess on the inside that'll fit into. So yeah, that just fits on there like so for now. Now we turn our attention to the other side, and you can see we've got the pins, so we're going to fit those. So we've got the pins plugged in, all the cables all nicely routed, ready to move on to the next stage. Okay, so we've got to route these wires through so that they can feed up to the brain. This one here on the right It's just going to go through the middle there. And this one on the left, it's just going to tuck in that gap a little bit inside there and come out by the beck there, by the voltage regulator. We can spool up a bit of this cable like so, just to make that a little bit shorter. Okay, so as you can see here, I've also fitted my the two longer SMA pigtails. They're both going to be going up around that sort of direction. So I'm just going to pre-bend these so that they're going in the right sort of direction. Then we're going to take our carbon plate here, loop everything inside of it like that. So those two are going to go up right where that corner of carbon is. These are all going to go up where they sit. And we're just going to fit these 4 countersunk screws. And that's going to hold that carbon plate in place. So with carbon plate in place and all the cables and pigtails all nicely routed, that whole bottom section's now ready to go. And we're going to move on to preparing the brain, gimbal parts and the surround. Okay, so there's a couple of things we need to do with the brain and the gimbal. I like to leave, you can leave all the gimbal cables attached to the brain through all of this process, through the whole fitting process, but we need to remove these rubber bits that are attached to the cables because they're going to get in the way. So we're going to cut those off. And one thing to bear in mind with this wide cable here is sometimes when you remove this rubber plastic, it can leave exposed wires. So I think it kind of takes the coating of the cables off with the plastic. So try your best not to remove the coating of the cables, but if you do, just inspect it, make sure none of them are touching, and then put some electrical tape around it. The other thing that's easier to do now rather than later is we actually are going to replace these gummies with these larger ones. These are official DJI upgrade, and they're actually designed for carrying the X5 and the X7 gimbal. So really easy to fit. You just push these out and put these in. But there is a specific way of doing it. So that one on the back that is on its own has the little tail sticking up, and the other two go in the opposite way with the tails sticking down. So I'm just going to do that now. Yeah, so I'm going to fit these 3 bigger balls to the gimbal, and I'm going to remove the rubbers from the cables. Okay, so you can see here I've cleanly removed the rubber bits. Didn't cause any damage, so I haven't had to put any tape on. Although these 2 cables separate when you remove the rubber, so it's actually not a bad idea just to put a bit of tape around there just to hold them together so it's nice and clean. I fitted the bigger rubber balls to the bottom, and so that's just basically prepared to fit to the rest of the Pandora V2, right to the bottom section. And it's basically going to go like this. So that wide cable is going to double back on itself and go like that, and the MIPI cable is going to come up from the bottom, and then they're both going to go up through the top plate and mount something like that. So just pop that to one side for now, because you're going to need to prepare the surround. Okay, so bloods from the future here. As you can see, I've actually fitted these carbon fibre parts to the bottoms of the larger balls, and should have done that while it was all off of the Pandora V2 body, to be honest, because it's really hard to do when you've only got a short amount of cable to work with, and you've got to be careful not to tug on this cable too much. So yeah, make sure you fit those at this stage rather than the stage I'm at here. If you haven't done already, fit the other end of the JST power cable to the fan and mount it in the surround like this. So you've got the quarter 20 mounting holes on the left there, and then the fan with the cable going out to the right with the logo inbound. So you shouldn't be able to see the logo from the outside or any of the little bars that hold the thing together. So that's the surround prepared. Now bringing back in the bottom section of the Pandora V2. Now it's kind of half questionable whether you fit this first and then the brain, or the brain and then this, because if you fit this without the brain, then it's going to be easier to bolt this into this, but then it's going to be harder to get the brain in. If you fit the brain first, it's going to be really easy to get these cables in and routed well, but then it can be a little bit tricky turning it upside down and fitting this. But yeah, I think the second option is probably the best, and it's certainly going to be the easiest one for me to show you where the cables go, even though it is quite obvious. So looking on the bottom of the brain here, you can see you've got that socket there just above the MIPI. That's for the SSD, and then this one, sorry, no, that one goes through to the other side. This one plugs in right there just below the black part. And the brain should just slot into the carbon fibre like that. And it's just going to leave your JST poking out the bottom there. This one really free going up there. And over in this back corner, you're going to have your two SMA pigtails poking up like so. Okay, so if we now take the surround and get the gimbal through it, get that cable going up for it as well. Get the two pigtails in there. Make sure none of that is getting caught. And we're going to have to try and plug in, so you can do that down the side there. Plug in the fan. A little bit of jiggling around, you'll be able to get that surround nice and slotted in. You might need to loosen the two screws here that hold this dividing plate. That's usually the reason why it doesn't go in. And you can see that one's coming up ready to just plug straight into there. So you might as well plug that one in because it will help hold the brain in when we turn it over to put the bolts in. So yeah, as I say, I want to turn the whole thing over, try and hold the brain and the gimbal all in place. You want to keep the surround and the bottom unit together because we're going to fit these 8 screws, which are 10mm buttons. So just make your way around it, ensuring that the two parts are nicely aligned. To be fair, it is a little bit awkward, so you do only really need 4 of them in to start with, just to hold it together. So as you can see, yeah, the surround is now fixed to the bottom, and this is all nice and free. And that's got a little bit messed up. So just tidy that up so this has as much slack on it as possible, 'cause you don't want this to be getting pulled. Now the top piece of carbon, we're going to need to fit the, there's two standoffs that fit here with countersunk screws on the other side, and then that will fit on the top piece, and that little slot there will slot into this piece of carbon. Okay, so I fitted the two standoffs to this top piece of carbon. I've also fitted the shorter pigtail SMA connectors to the top print, and now we're going to try and put it all together. You want to start with the carbon and get it in that slot there so it holds in place, and then these two pigtails are going to go in the middle two slot holes, because you should be able to get, there's a little bit that goes through this hole here, and obviously you want that carbon to slot in there. You need these to not be trapped underneath that carbon there. So fitting this top print, it splits there so that you can get these cables through it. So just split it like so. And put the cables through. And then this is going to be very difficult to do on camera, so I'm probably not going to be able to, but we're going to route this cable something like that and into that top slot, and we're going to route this cable something like that and into that bottom slot. So it's a bit fiddly, so I'm going to have to do it off camera, but hopefully that won't be an issue for you. Okay, so now with the top print in place, there's only these two bolts and these two bolts to fit, which fit the gimbal to the top plate. But before fitting those bolts, we're going to fit the top plate that goes around on here. So it's got a cut out there so you can feed it through the wires, and this little TPU piece will fit in after. So now that top plate can go in place. That's fitted in place with 4 of these 6mm countersunk screws. Okay, so you will notice that I left this thing on, so if your Inspire 2 comes with one of these, just leave it on and you can put it underneath the bolts when we attach that to there. Use the 2 smaller socket bolts at the back and these 2 long ones at the front. Yeah, doing this now, I think what I'll actually do is include some washers, so it'd be much better with a washer on there to trap the cable rather than trying to trap it underneath the head of the screw. We'll trap it underneath a washer instead. So yeah, so I haven't actually used one of these before, so at least my design works. So yeah, the rear one can fit on like so, and then these 2 long bolts go in the front here. Okay, so the last part of the fit is the bottom plate, which comes with this with the 1/4-20" mounting holes built into it. That just fits on there like so, and we use these 4 long 20mm countersunk screws to secure it in place. Don't forget to fit the extra screws that I didn't fit earlier. Okay, so now with all the bolts fitted, go around, make sure they're all nice and tight, and you're good to go. You just got to fit your antennas, plug in a battery, plug in the SSD, and fire it up. Hopefully, if you followed all the steps carefully and nothing's gone wrong, it should just fire up and work like it did when you tested it on the bench earlier. So hope you've enjoyed building it. It's quite a lot of it's quite a lot of steps and yeah, quite involved, but it's maybe a little bit easier to build than the last one. And yeah, when you're left with it at the end, it's a really nice solid unit. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to fit the GPS module to the Pandora V2. And the first thing we're going to do is remove this blanking plate, because that is where the GPS module cable goes through. We've replaced that plate with this carbon piece and this 3D print, which you can pre-fit with the two carbon side panels. Okay, so with the GPS bracket fitted, we can move on and remove the bottom plate so we can get access to the PDB to plug it in. Now we're going to move on to fitting the GPS, and the GPS drops in like so. It's got these two little cutouts here and here. Just slot into the little cutouts in the mount. It's secured in place using the got these three little screws that go in there, there and there. Okay, so with the GPS secured to the top plate, you can just get that bottom part and fit that on like so. Line up the slot so that it's lined up and then use these 4 self-tapping screws to hold the whole thing together. Okay, so with the GPS nicely secured inside the mount there, you need to determine whether you're going to be running your Pandora V2 with the gimbal on top or with the gimbal on bottom. So I've designed this so that it can work both ways and have the GPS pointing up. So you can attach it like that. So if you've got the gimbal on top, the GPS is still facing up. Or if you're doing bottom mounted gimbal, you can fit the GPS like so. So it's still pointing, facing upwards. So this one I'm actually doing bottom mount gimbal to go on the back of a car. Okay, so the gimbal connects to this connector here. So you feed the cable through and it needs to plug in like that. So just feed your cable through like so and use some tweezers to connect it in there. I really can't do this on camera, it's too awkward. Okay, so now with the cable routed through into the inside and plugged into the socket, you can attach this in whichever orientation you need it to be in, and then use the 2 other M3 countersunk screws to hold it in place. Then just tighten them all up and the mount becomes nice and solid. So you can even hold it by it, of course. Then just go ahead and refit your top or bottom plate depending on which way you're going, and there's your GPS fit. Okay, so after downloading the Drone Hacks software, it'll open up in your desktop like this, and it'll just be searching for devices. At this stage you can connect your Pandora V2 to your computer over USB and turn and power up your Pandora V2 as well. You'll need to power it off of a 6S battery so it all powers up properly, and this Drone Hack software should find it. There we go. So you can see now that the Drone Hack software has found it, and it does some little checks, and when this hack parameters thing becomes available to click, you can click that and it will start reading the parameters from your drone. As it says, this can take a little while, so just bear with it and just wait for it to read all the parameters. Okay, so now that it's read all the parameters, you want to click this thing here, Advanced Parameters. It brings up this separate box, and it's got a search box here. So you're going to type IMU0, and then on the side here you'll see that IMU0 underscore direction comes up. Mine is set to value 5. Okay, so when you click the IMU0 underscore direction, it brings up this section here, which tells you what you can move this slider and choose whatever you want to choose between 0 and 8. Okay, so out of the options of a minimum of 0 to a maximum of 8, there are only 2 options that we need to use. The default is 0, so before taking the Inspire apart or before using this, yours will probably be on 0, whereas I've changed mine to 5, and the other one that we use is 7. So you're only ever going to really need to use 5 or 7, depending on if you want to use top or bottom mount gimbal. 5 is for top mounted gimbal and 7 is for bottom mounted gimbal. So if you're running the gimbal on top, put it on to 5, save the parameter. If you're running the gimbal on bottom, put it to 7, save the parameter. Nothing really seems to happen there, but you can just go ahead and close this and write parameters to drone like that. Does a little thing, says all changed parameters successfully written. You can go back in here just to double check. So if I type IMU0, you can see there that the value has changed to 7. So I'll just change mine back to 5 and show you again. Write parameters to drone. IMU0, and it's changed to 5. And then literally you can just close this, unplug your drone, and it's done. So really easy. There's a bunch of other things in there that you can spend your time having a look at. But yeah, the only ones we need to worry about is changing that IMU0_direction to 5 or 7, depending on if you want top or bottom mount gimbal. Okay, so you've hopefully managed all that and got through the build guide easily and haven't had any problems, and your Pandora V2 is now up and running. Well, just in case it isn't and you've got any problems, then feel free to drop me an email or just leave a comment below. I'd be happy to help. So yeah, happy building. I'll see you in the next one. Laters.